You're at work at your first job and you just completed a tiring task. So you decide to relax a bit before you get back to it. Your boss comes, sees you, and orders you back on your feet. Dejected and maybe even a little confused, you start walking around, pretending to do work. What a weird reality, right? Having to pretend to do work to appease your boss even if there's absolutely nothing left to do? It's degrading. The explanation goes that when you're on the clock, you're on company time. You've essentially leased your time out. They don't own you, that's illegal, but they own your time. And so you're at their whims and have to look confused at your computer or walk around the store pretending to dust things. Yet if you sit down and think about it, the entire premise that your time can be counted separately from you as a person, and someone can own one and not the other, is a bit nonsensical and really novel. At any other point in history, if you were a powerful man and saw an artisan whose wares you liked, you have two options: buy the wares or buy the worker. But buying their time independent from their personhood? Unheard of. Some might argue that this is one of capitalism's greatest feats. But the way capitalism has reshaped our relationship to time itself has had a lot of damaging consequences. Now, this video will be made infinitely easier to process if you abandon any notions of time as a solely physical phenomenon. Newtonian time is important, but that's not the entire picture. Instead, time is better viewed as a social relationship between an individual, their community, and the world around them. This might be a tough thing to conceptualize, but I'll try my best to illustrate. Minutes, hours, weeks, months. This is how we view time now, as a static grid of individual components against which we can measure things like labor. But before easily available clock technology, people viewed time differently. The concept of time as an ever-present ongoing thing has been around since forever, but it was a phenomenon restricted to the heavens. Here on Earth, time was messy. Hours and days vary in length depending on the season, so they're not a very good metric. And rudimentary timekeeping technology like sundials would just not work depending on the weather. So in lieu of this, ancient societies would measure time through labor itself. A good example being European calendars that are based on seasons to serve farm work, and Islamic calendars being based on lunar cycles to serve their nomadic needs. Ask a villager how far away a village is, and they'll probably say that the village is 2 rice cookings away, or the cooking time of 10 eggs. And since time was not on the minds of the commoner, people dealt with time nonchalantly, completely unlike today. Well, not totally unlike today. My bad. Farmers rose when the sun did and slept when it went down. Fishers followed the rhythm of the sea. Time, labor, and nature were inseparable, and because of this, there was no great conflict between labor and free time. People rested often, partied, and had fun, but work was an inalienable part of life. The version of time I'm describing here is known as social time. It's a time inseparable from the social relations of people in a community and their labor. Social time is differentiated from clock time, in which our social relations are not based on tasks and labor, but by the constant, ever-present ticking away of the clock. This one is more familiar to us. Because of the lack of clock time, it's easy to see why wage labor would confuse the hell out of, say, an ancient Athenian. Time as a divisible, measurable unit, which we could use to measure labor, just didn't exist. However, there was one group of people to whom wage labor might not be so unprecedented: ancient slaves. Some slaves would actually be leased off to work in some facility for a day or two and split the profits with their masters. And like slaves, the phenomena of a boss demanding busy work for the sake of busy work is an experience modern workers share almost exclusively with ancient slaves. The other identity group who can claim this experience is women. Whether they be wives or children, they've historically been held to the same standard of working for work's sake. And considering domestic housework has itself been a method to enforce control over women by men, the similarities make sense. Anyway, the transition towards a world where clock time became pervasive seems pretty self-evident, so I'll skim over it. From the 15th century onward, clock technology got better and better, and towns installed central clock towers. The merchant culture of timekeeping was already well established by the late medieval period, and as clock technology got better and better, it spread to the middle class and petite bourgeoisie, an all-consuming way of life. It slowly seeped its way into the working class with the proliferation of pocket watches, and by the 18th and 19th century, as capitalism took over and became increasingly globalized and decentralized, timekeeping set itself as the new normal. Then, completely separating timekeeping from the old celestial method. We generally know all of this, but what were its effects? With clock time as the global hegemon came an entirely new discipline, time management. Time management had been around since the dominance of social time, but since the lives of people generally revolved around their labor, time discipline was super lax. Under clock time, factory owners sought innovative new ways to absolutely crush the human spirit of their workers. The enforcement of grueling working conditions for sometimes up to 18-hour days led to customary heavy weekend drinking. One worker described the widespread cycle of heavy work week to heavy weekend vomiting in 1829. This is the case with every workman I have ever known, and in proportion as a man's case is hopeless, will such fits more frequently occur and be of longer duration. Bleak. This had also created the necessity of choosing between values. Should you work to support your kid or stay at home to raise them? Under clock time, everything became a choice and one quantified through monetary value. But this has created an unquantifiable weight upon workers. Life became a race against time, leisure and rest became wasted time. Time itself was money, commodified. With this new status quo, there really is no moment of respite. Yet while clock time is dominant, social time still manages to seep its way into our lives. Most prominent in Western life is childbirth. For about a 9-month period, the entirety of a person's world slowly ceases to follow clock time, giving them time to live according to a different schedule. Which is why the battles for maternity and paternity leave are so crucial. They represent a vestige of the old world. One where you get to slow down and live without the overbearing presence of the capitalist sphere regulating your every move. A common complaint you hear about socialism is that it's not as efficient as capitalism. Most proponents of socialism will retort with numbers on the Soviet Union's grain production or something to prove that it's actually more efficient. And while these debates are worth having, I think they miss the point. Maybe capitalism really is more efficient, and socialism is the alternative where you're allowed to slow down and breathe without fear. Maybe capitalism really is more efficient, and that's the whole point.